Good evening and welcome to LNPG Lock-in event number 26. It's called Funding Growth. So if you're looking to expand your portfolio, tonight's the night for you guys. Let's get the evening started. But first, I need to confirm that this event is being recorded. So if you do need evidence of what you were doing between 6:45 and 7:45 tonight, do remember to turn your camera on for your Zoom meeting. But if you want to remain anonymous, then please close your camera or exit the meeting. Without further delay, I think we're almost there. I can see the numbers are settling, so let's start the event. Tonight, it gives me great pleasure to introduce someone who I've known for years, but only recently got to learn a lot more about him. Nick and I first met Rory at the infamous Berkshire Property Meet. Anyone here who can remember those events when we could actually meet in physical person? We met Rory nearly 10 years ago, so look where persistence pays. Rory at the Berkshire Property event for years with 200 to 300 employees, and tonight he's with LNPG and on the Zoom, and everyone else. We should be hitting the 5,000 members. So don't forget, if you miss anything on the recording tonight, it's on the website for the future. I always thought Rory was the go-to man for self-funding. For bridging events, bridging projects. But as I said, when I got to know Rory better, I learned he wasn't just what I would call a one-trick pony, but a complete all-rounder. So tonight, we'll be having a detailed presentation from Rory, but please feel free to ask any questions and put them in the chat or in the Facebook Live, which we will present at the end of the presentation to Rory. Remember, there's no such thing as a daft question, only an unanswered question. So, without further ado, I won't steal Rory's thunder any further. Let me present Mr. Rory O'Mara. Over to you, Rory.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Paul. So let's see, first of all, guys, if I can share my screen. Can everybody see the slide that says how to fund your property business?
Yes, we can.
That's great. Okay, let me just move that out of the way. So we're in business. Right, so we've got a fair number of people on board. Good evening, folks. Buckle up your seats. So we've got a lot to get through. So welcome to our webinar hosted by the good guys at LNPG on how to fund your property empire. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Rory O'Mara, and I was the founder of Closed Bridging Finance. And it gives me, and I'd like to just thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to, to share some of the knowledge and things that I've done in this business in the last 15 to 20 years. My goal is to inspire you to do more and to achieve your goals and dreams. And if it's important to you, go leave a legacy. So I set up Closed Bridging Finance in 2006, really to lend my own money. For those who recall, back in the day, you could do a same-day bridge or a daylight bridge or a closed bridge. And you could do it really without using any of your own money. And you've essentially got paid to buy houses. But we've moved on from those days. You can't operate in that way now. So we lend our own funds, obviously for more than a day. We broker, we work with traditional lenders, with commercial banks, family offices, private high net worth lenders and individuals. And I joint venture as well on projects. And our expertise is in finding really creative solutions to what I'd call complex finance problems, and also the easy stuff as well, but I like complicated. So those who know me, I'm blunt, direct, and transparent. I just tell it as it is. So, if you don't need a bridging loan, I'll tell you. And I'd say in the last 15 plus years, we've helped over 350 plus investors who've come to my home office here in sunny Winchester. And hopefully I'll be able to start those again. That's doing strategy reviews. But just to set the scene, I had a client last week call me about wanting a bridging loan. He'd been let down by another provider. He wasn't happy with the way they were putting charges on his portfolio. And it was really interesting when we understood what he thought he needed a bridging loan. Actually, what he needed is to step back and rethink the way he was actually doing the deal. And it turned out the best way to do the deal, in my opinion, was to go back to the vendor and actually renegotiate and maybe offer him a bit more money. So he didn't need a bridging loan. He could go straight to a buy-to-let mortgage. And it was really nice to see 12 hours later, I get a text going, guess what, Rory? Client's happy to stick with me. He doesn't want any more money. He realizes this might take 12 weeks or so to get it over the line because of COVID. And that's what I love, is that way of that creative thinking. So hopefully I can help you think slightly differently. What do? We do bridging finance, buy-to-let mortgages, development finance, second charges, the top-up money, which is like the mezzanine finance. I've got a whole team that I built over 15 years that collaborate and work with me. So we look to get the right solution for our clients to solve their problems. So here I want to focus on the concept of how to secure 100% property development finance. And I just want to go into that in a bit more detail because it's something you may not have considered, but I'll stretch it out to not just this form of financing, but bridging and other forms as well. So one of the objectives is, can I show you how to fund your property projects with what I call OPM, so other people's money. And I'll share as much content as I can. I'll also go through some case studies as well. So go through some, I think I've got half a dozen at least, that will show you how my clients have actually made money and taken advantage of the whole concept of leverage. And when you get leverage, that's when you really can grow your business. So I also like to mess with your heads to get you sort of thinking differently and perhaps to get you out of your comfort zone. And certainly what I've found in some of the things I've done and clients I've worked with, if you get out of your comfort zone, you can go do more. So, the question is, do you have a sort of live profitable project with planning, but not the funds to get going? Well, stay tuned. And if you haven't, stay tuned anyway, because you're going to learn a few things of how you could collaborate with people and make a bucket load of cash. The other thing is, at the end of it, I'll give you an opportunity to book a 15, 20-minute call with me to talk about if you've got projects that you're working on or perhaps your strategy. And that's what I really enjoy doing. For those of you, if you haven't met me, Paul gave me a good intro. I met Nick and Paul at Berkshire Property Meet many years ago. But in the past 15 or so years, I have funded hundreds of property projects. Many the old-fashioned no to low money down, major refurbs, conversions, new build, the majority with our own funds or with our partners' funds. And we just look for that creative solution. I spent the last 33 plus years, in business. When I started, I graduated, went to work in the city, and then I moved on from there. I get bored very quickly. I look for opportunity. So more of an entrepreneur. I set up an IT consultancy, which I then sold about 5 years later to my business partner at the time, and set up closed bridging finance. And we started lending our own funds and then the funds of high net worth investors. And we'll also work with other partners as well who are open to funding projects, which can also include other lenders for, say, bridging or perhaps just traditional buy-to-let mortgages or HMO mortgages, for example. But our expertise is this sort of specialist finance arena and an area that not everybody understands. An example, for example, 100% joint venture funding. So we look to solve what I would call the money bit of the sort of the property jigsaw. Now, your situation. So now I'll assume you've got a proven track record in maybe delivering results, could be refurbs, conversions, developments. Maybe you own a buy-to-let portfolio. You might have some commercial units or a mix of some HMOs, or you just might buy and flip stuff as well. But today what we found is, a lot of the people we're speaking to get really frustrated by the lack of funds, where traditional lenders are not always interested. They follow that sort of tick box process. But, if you have a project or two that's viable, then, hopefully we can help. So there's always a bit of small print I put my teeth in, and that is, look, all funding is subject to underwriting, valuation, and lender opinion. And this presentation is not an offer to guarantee funds or offer financial advice. If you haven't, folks, if you don't have a good financial advisor, as in an accountant or a tax accountant, you strongly urge you to seek one out, and they can offer the advice that you need, plus a really good solicitor. So who is this for? So let's say you're a developer, you've got a proven track record, and you've got a project that's got some outline planning, possibly full planning. then there is some scope to get 100% joint venture development funding, where essentially you build to sell. But you might also think, well, that's not what I want to do. I actually like to look at the traditional route for funding. I may want to hold, I may want to sell, or a blend. I've got some case studies will show that. Or you might just want some help with strategy. Then those are things that I can help. So let's crack on. Raising funds. So I want to look at two ideas for raising funds. One, 100% joint venture funding, build to sell. Two, traditional funding, a build to hold or sell. So let's get on with option number one. So you're a developer with this proven track record. Yeah, you have a live project where planning consent has been granted. That can be outlined or full consent determined. And the max cost with this particular lender that we're working with. So this is one of the, if you want to write, if you're making notes or taking photos, 2.5 million total cost for the land and the build for this particular facility. Then the next key piece of information, the margin on GDV needs to be minimum 27% pre-finance cost, okay? And it's a build to sell project with a site that you do not own, okay? So we're then looking at, you're creating what we might call middle of the market housing, which is sort of reasonably priced for the area. So that could be 3-bed houses or it could be flats. Maximum term for this facility would be about 15 months. But the most important thing is there's no personal guarantee. You're not liable for the funds and there are no valuations as well. Okay, so in terms of process, how does it work? So an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, is set up by the lender to buy the land or the property that we're going to work on. And you, the developer, you undertake to complete the works based on the costings that you've talked about. Now, the lender will fund all of the project based on the agreed costs. And what they'll do is they'll charge interest on the funds that have been drawn down. That costing is akin to bridging. So probably a 2% arrangement fee, maybe around 1% a month. That's an expense. Then you finish the project, the properties are sold, and obviously then what's left, that profit is split 50-50. But your upfront cash as a developer, now if you don't have the development expertise, maybe someone in your power team does, you set up your own SPV, your own specialist company, this could potentially work. In terms of cash requirement, the legal bill to set up for the conveyancing and the SPV for the funder to own the asset and enter into the joint venture agreement with you is about £5,000 to £6,000. You get that back on the day of completion. The only other funds you need will be some of the money to be spade ready to get going. But normally after say 4 or 5 weeks or whatever has been agreed for drawdown after the monitoring survey is there, you get that money back. So you have no money left in this deal. Your return on cash is phenomenally high because there's no cash left in. So next thing, just looking at, here's an example of one of the projects using this facility. It's a bungalow that's been knocked down, planning for 9 houses. The developer on this, he's put no money left in the deal. He's made nearly £450,000. So we've got another one, which is 4 bungalows in Stafford. So term for 12 months. Again, the profit for the developer on this, just under 140,000. So we can see the site on the left and then the finished bungalows on the right. Then we have another one, which is 12 apartments in West Sussex, 15-month term. So the profit on this for the developer, again, you've got no funds in this. You just need an additional project, fully funded, £250,000 profit or that just or thereabouts. So again, we can see the site on the left and then the finished apartments on the right-hand side. Okay, so that's one particular method of funding. You might think, well, actually, I don't really want to give all of that away. Can I do it another way? Absolutely. Let's look at funding option number 2. So it's what I'd call traditional development funding. You really do need a proven track record, or in your team have undertaken tasks like this before. Now, this could be building new properties or major conversions. Ideally, your project will need planning. You don't really want to be taking a punt on getting planning, and then if you don't get planning, you've left a load of capital in an asset that you may not be able to do anything with. Your margin on your GDV on this has got to be 20 to 25%, more akin to 23 to 25% pre-finance, I would say, for it to be viable. And this could be build to sell or build to hold. And some of the case studies I'll show you will represent that. Now, in terms of the facility, you're looking at a typical facility in the region of, say, 50 to 60% of the gross development value. Sometimes can be a little bit higher. We've got other partners that might go to, say, maybe 65% of GDV. The funding is typically 100% of the build in stages, which is then paid in arrears. And funding for the purchase is typically maximum, say, 50% of the purchase price or thereabouts, depending on what the stress test is on the total facility. So you're looking at a blend of what did the build cost, what's the purchase price, what's the overall facility. Now, that means, you need funds to cover the deposit and the associated fees being, stamp duty, your legal bills, the lender's legal bills, and a float to get going for the build for phase one, to be spade ready, as they say, and then the drawdowns will kick in. Now, this is all by agreement. If you have additional security, I've got some clients who always have one unencumbered property with no debt. So you throw that into the mix, then it's possible to have a higher facility. And we've funded many viable, profitable projects at 100% times purchase price, if the case stacks and if I've got the funds at the time. Now, the costs typically for traditional funding, there will be an arrangement fee. Lender arrangement fee could be typically 2%, maybe 3%. It depends. There may or may not be an exit fee. We try not to have exit fees where appropriate. There'll be a broker fee if a broker was used, and then you've got monthly interest. So here's an example of a project. Then we've got the lender legals and the valuation fee, and there'll be whatever they are. Now, we just move on to an example I've got here. So this is a project, this is a live project. So the client has a project where it's a car park. He is planning for 12 apartments. He's got a really good margin on this. He knows exactly what he's going to do after the project has been built. He has an exit for a term mortgage. These apartments serve a particular purpose for a client who will take them on a long-term lease. And that's the best way to run a project like this. Always understand the exit, and then you're working your way back from the exit, which he has done on this one. So just very briefly, if we just look at bridging finance.
Rory, just before we go on, because we've had a couple of questions and I want to make sure that I match them up correctly, because I'm only going to get lost.
Yeah.
So you mentioned JV funding, joint venture funding at the beginning, sort of option one.
Yeah.
Is that available in Scotland as well?
Right, very good question. So Scotland, the 100% joint venture facility, it is available in Scotland. I've got to be very clear on this. It has to be Glasgow or Edinburgh or along that M8 corridor, very close to the city centre. So yes, there is an appetite to lend, but again, like all these projects, they are case by case. But yeah, the scope to do that there.
Okay. And with regards to your second option there, can that be used for first-time projects?
Yeah, so not the 100% joint venture, you're going to struggle. You need to be experienced. But if we're looking at what I call traditional development funding and bridging for first-time projects, yes, it really is, folks. I work on the basis, if you've never done it, you're going to struggle probably to get money for a build. But it's worth the conversation because it depends who's in your team. And if you've got a good team that have got a track record or experience, then perhaps you've got to have to give away a slice of the equity in your SPV to get the deal done. And I'll go through that because that's what I'm doing with a builder who wanted to fund a project. So I'll cover that as we go through. So bridging. So bridging, typically on a bridging loan, you'll get a gross facility, maybe 70, maybe 75% loan to value, i.e. subject to what the value is and also purchase price will be the lower of. The key question, when you take a bridging loan out, what you want to know is what's the net advance on the day of completion? It's typically 60% as a rough guide. So if you bought a place for 100,000, if the loan was going to run for maybe 9 to 12 months, you're probably going to get about 60,000 approximately, because you don't service the interest actually monthly. It's normally retained, it's deducted, and then you pay it at the end when you redeem the loan. But you'd use a bridging loan for a quick purchase, often when a property is not mortgageable. And that's one of the key ones. So no kitchen, no bathroom, no buy-to-let mortgage. Gives you an opportunity to steal a march on the competition. Then you'd look to use a bridging loan. Then you obviously would need the associated deposit and the fees and the money for works if you're enhancing the value on a property, maybe converting, say, a 3-bed into a 5-bed HMO, for example. There is scope for higher funding if you have additional security. We always look for that. And the usual costs would be akin to what I mentioned earlier. There'll be an arrangement fee, shouldn't really be an exit fee, probably a broker fee, a monthly interest, and then the lender legals and the appropriate valuation fee for the project. So let's have a look at some case studies. So hopefully this is where I want to get you thinking just outside of your sort of comfort zone and going, actually, I could probably do this. So here we go. So this is a project that I worked on with a client a few years back. He identified an empty warehouse which was in perfect condition to be knocked down, basically, and build a 48-bed student block made up of, it was 8 6-bed cluster flats. We knew he'd get planning, so I supplied the bridging on this through my company, and we funded about 93% of the purchase price. He had some additional security. He secured the planning consent to create what you can see, which is the bigger building on the right, and the whole thing got built. That's worth now well in excess of 3 million plus, I'd say, well beyond that. And if you're a student, you'd pay probably 140, 150 pounds a week. So on a yield basis, yeah, probably 3.5 million. So well over $1 million plus profit almost once that site had been finished. Now, what was interesting about this project, we worked on a lot of typical converting 3 beds to 5-bed HMO or 6-bed HMO. And then one day you just have this eureka moment and you realize, I've got to go bigger. And this was the going bigger. And then you've just got to expand your team and go for it. And it's doable. And the funds can be raised, but you've got to have a good team around you. Next one, you probably have seen, and I dare say it, we will see many more empty pubs. This was a pub that had been empty for, I think, about 3 years. So the client in question used an option contract to obtain control of the asset so he could get appropriate planning. The planning for this was 3 6-bed flats. To you and me, that's an 18-bed HMO. And that would generate probably 70,000, 80,000 pounds a year in gross rent, which you would sell on a yield basis. Now, I funded pretty much all of the costs on this, and I made a tidy sum, and my client probably made double what I made. And we were both laughing about it because that's how it works. Everyone has to be fed in the process, and everybody gets fed, then the wheel keeps moving and you go to the next project and the next project. It was sold to an investor who bought it on an income yield, and I think it was since sold again because the yield was very good. Cash in the till, on to the next project. Now, you won't see me, if we could stand on stage, I'm not always going to tell you these projects are rosy, because they're not always rosy. You get problems, and that's what happens if you're in the property business. So if you look on the left, you can see the property. So the client basically identified this. It was a probate acquisition in need of major refurbishment, and the plan was to basically buy it and then put an extension on the back and create 2 3-bed townhouses. Sorry, 2 3-bed houses. There were significant delays in planning, and that caused problems for the original contractor to say, look, I can't hang around. Now, we had agreed terms for me to fund all of the purchase and all of the build. The client had to put some money in. You need a plan A, a plan B, and sometimes, folks, a plan C, because things go wrong. So the client had to put a bit more money in because it just wasn't economical for us to fund all of it when we worked out the end value and what the exit would be. So anyway, the work got done, it got finished, it was refinanced, and you move on to the next project. But be mindful, things can go wrong. Now, the next project, a bit like number 9 buses, they come along in threes. This is a case study that goes back probably to just after the last crash. It's relevant because the client had a project and another one came along and then another one. And in this particular case, the client had a bridging loan with another lender who I knew were in big trouble with the FCA. And we thought that actually you just don't want to be embroiled in that because of what was going on with this other company. So we provided a facility for just over £500,000, 18 flats converted, including a rear extension, post-works value well in excess of 2 million. They had a very clear model of what they worked to in terms of creating 1 and 2 bedroom flats. All the units were sold, move on to the next project. So a really good example of doing a sort of a title split. You've got, you're basically buying, splitting everything, selling it, and realizing the value. Next case study, often you'll hear about, oh, an office to resi conversion. How does it work? This is one of the best ones that I've been involved in with regards to funding. So you can see the office on the left-hand side. If you look at the middle picture, they've added an additional floor. So this created about 12 flats. We provided the bridging loan, I think it's about 450,000 or thereabouts to cover the purchase. Client covered the money for the build. The GDV would be well in excess of 2.x million. Now, if you're clever and you understand how to play the long game, so in your team, you need a really good planning consultant. In the roof, if you look, you can't see it, but you would set the roof up so that you could create 3 additional flats. Go back at a later date, play the planning game, and out of nowhere, because they're there now, the 3 additional flats that came out of the roof void, and that's going to be worth at least another 450,000 in GDV. So again, it's just having a really clear plan over maybe an 18-month to 2-year period. Okay, so this site, again, this was found on Rightmove. There were no clever deals running around trying to find it. Essentially, an old hairdresser's with some flats above in a terrible condition, some industrial workspace at the rear, which is the picture you see on the right-hand side. And then at the further back, there was a plot for development. And to the right of this, another plot, which the client split with a business partner. We funded this side, pretty much all of the build, fair proportion, sorry, of the purchase, and a fair proportion towards the build. Client did the conversion, made an absolute fantastic job of it. Again, as a developer and a portfolio landlord, basically sold some, kept some. So you'd work out all of the numbers to make sure that you're at least recycling some of your cash so that you can move to the next project. And then let's look at the next project. So we've got these 2 units on the left. I want to focus on the right-hand side. Basically, again, if you know your patch, these were offices. So got planning consent to add a rear extension to create 7 flats, obviously to go from office to residential. So we provided a bridging loan on that to cover, I think, most of the purchase price and a bit towards the build. The planning was achieved. The client went through this very, very quickly. And again, the end value well in excess of, say, 1.2 million. The exit, sell some, keep some, so some for the portfolio, then to recycle some of your cash to move to the next project. The next one, which is this is a live one because this is one we did in lockdown for a client a little bit further north. So they found the site. I did a bridging loan on it. Typically, as I said, I think it was about 60% of the buy price or thereabouts funded. They've got full planning on this now. So this will be a fantastic it's 6 flats with 6 beds, all en suite, really high-end HMO, and I'd expect that to be worth well over 2 million plus once they finish the work. So that's just literally happened as we speak. Then, so just to give you a flavour of some of the other sort of projects that we've worked on. So if you look at the top left, I'll dedicate this to a good friend of mine, a client who recently passed, a guy called Rick Legg, and this was a real passion of Rick's. This is Ferryside down in Wales. This project was a complete and utter mess. He turned it into some holiday accommodation, and if you look at the picture with the black box around it, that's basically the kit that comes out of the Ideal Home Show kit house. And he used to have an arrangement with them and created a wonderful development down there. What else have we got? So we've got some flats above a shop in the Bristol area. One of those we've got, the client bought essentially a kebab shop, cut it in 2, made the kebab shop smaller, put some accommodation at the rear, along with refurbishing some flats above. Let's have a look. We've got a couple of HMOs, a 3-bed into a 6-bed, which is one that I owned and sold. On the right-hand side at the bottom, we can see this was a 14-bed HMO conversion of solicitors' offices in Northampton. And again, they were all en suite, again, very early days of really pushing HMOs. And then at the top, we can see that's a 7+ bed HMO in the East Midlands, which was an old bank. And there's so many, too many to name, but hopefully that gives you a flavor of the types of projects that we have worked on. Now, what I also wanted to share with you is just a few tips and ideas on working with investors to fund projects. You don't just have to go to lenders like myself, you can collaborate. So first off, what type of joint venture could you undertake? Well, we could have a JV with the landowner. They may own the site or the property. Ideally, if it's unencumbered, it has no debt, then it can be easy to get 100% of the build costs funded. You could JV with someone on a fixed return basis where you have a loan note and they pay you an interest. You'll often hear about doing profit share. A word of warning, yes, you can do profit share, and this is not advice, but where you are undertaking profit share, you have to be able to certify you are a high net worth individual or a sophisticated investor. And you could do that through your accountant and be mindful of the FCA rules on undertaking profit shares and working with high net worth and sophisticated investors. You could also JV with a developer. So I've got a project I'm working on now. I had a developer approach me about a project, and we said, well, let's have a look at it. Some first charge funding, which I will arrange, and then we'll go 50-50 on the shortfall of cash that's required to do the project, and we'll have a profit share. Oops. So is your JV safe? Well, let's have a look at some of the things I think you need to consider. I'd say always have some form of heads of terms. You could start with a blank sheet, map out what both sides agree, sign it, pass it to the solicitors to make a more formal agreement. Also, if we're talking about formal agreements, if there's a loan agreement, don't borrow it from somebody on Facebook. Actually, get your solicitor to maybe use the heads of terms and the appropriate legal precedents to create the loan agreement. If you've set up a new SPV, i.e. new limited company, what's in the shareholders agreement? Does that map out what you can and can't do? God forbid, if you die, what happens to your shares? Who gets first dibs on those? Is there life cover in place? So all those things a lawyer can help you with. If you're lending money and you want to charge, is it a first or a second charge? You need to be mindful that if someone's taking a first charge on your residential home, that can only be undertaken by a regulated lender. So you can't do that as an individual. I couldn't take a first charge on your main home. You may have some other assets, maybe buy-to-let portfolio, which could be offered as additional security. And sometimes you might have to give a PG known as a personal guarantee. You're liable, you've got skin in the game, as they say. And then when we start doing some of our DD, okay, what's the project? Do you understand it 100%? Could you articulate that? Could you write it down to your nearest and dearest? What are the costs? Is there contingency? What does it cost to buy the site, to do the build? Any miscellaneous costs that you are unaware of? And again, contingency. And then, what's the profit margin? So do you remember earlier we talked about the margin on GDV? And some of us are not always brilliant with maths. So we go, it's 27%. So how would you calculate that? Well, the profit is divided by the GDV, so the gross development value. So let's say the profit was 810,000 on a GDV of 3 million. Hey, by magic, that is 27% margin on GDV. And you would also want to be aware of what's the timescale to get planning, to acquire the asset, to build, and in this climate to also sell. And then if you can't sell, do you have the ability to rent? And if you're renting, does the rent stack on a stress test for a limited company or maybe an exit bridge? And all those things you'd want to talk about. Now, doing DD on your potential business partner, who are they? Would you invite them to your house, say, for dinner at your home or stay the weekend, pre and hopefully post-COVID? What are your respective roles and responsibilities? Can you speak with past clients, past JV partners? The good old fashioned, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. Your Experian credit report, for example, ID, your passport and driving license. You'd be amazed that some people may not be who they say they are. Have you done a bankruptcy search? What's happened in the past? A declaration about their past, and how do you know that they can deliver? Okay, so let's look at one of the projects that I'm working on. So this is a developer approached me and he said, look, Roy, I want to build these 2 exec houses. They're in the southwest. We want to use a fully finished timber frame panel, which is made in Europe through another client of mine. And that can be basically built in the factory to unbelievable quality and tolerances. And it can be installed within, say, 5 to 7 days on site, which is amazing, which rapidly reduces your build time. So this is with an experienced builder. The project itself, we've got a GDV of about 800K. The buy and build is approximately 600. We're still finalizing all of the costings. So we're going to be short about our margin is 200K, which is a 25% margin on the GDV. But so we're looking at putting in about 100K each, possibly on a loan note basis. So we would charge interest on the money we put in. And then we'll have a senior debt lender who will provide the 50% GDV, so approximately 400,000. We put 100 each, that gets us to the 600,000, and they've got 200K for us to distribute once we sell both the properties, and we share that profit 50-50. So that's how that one would work. So hopefully you found this funding insight. It's been helpful. It's got you thinking, and hopefully you can see an opportunity to make a few more pounds. But one of the things I want to focus on is this, and that is it's always mindset. And most of the investors I meet, sometimes there's that blockage. And I just thought I'd just share a little backstory with you, just to inspire you to think, oh yeah, if you can do this, and I guess I can as well. And so just excuse the hideous photo, but that's when I had hair. But I just want to give you the story. So this is about my brother Liam and myself. So when we were younger, we lived in loads of kids' homes, foster families, all that sort of stuff. And predominantly a lot of it was in Northern Ireland. Now, my brother always wanted to get into TV and radio. And he'd go into town with a cassette recorder and a microphone, and he'd go and interview people. And I think this kid is nuts. But what I'd learned was, if you have a really big goal, you can achieve anything if you absolutely focus on the goal and take the steps every single day. And if you have a look at the picture on the bottom left, I like this one, but he has interviewed every major A-list celebrity in the world. It's not my cup of tea, but this is a 90-minute one-on-one he did with Leonardo DiCaprio in San Francisco. I think it was a couple of years back. But I just wanted to share with you, if you set the goals, you can achieve it. For me, I just didn't like the idea of basically being poor. Now, I remember coming back in 1984, I went to work at a summer camp in North America. When I was 14, I bought this book, the Book of Home Plans. And I said, one day I will have a big house. And I've still got the book. It sits in my office here to remind me, always set your goals. And I had 40 quid. And I said to a mate of mine, look, I need somewhere to live because, I was pretty much homeless. But I set the goals, bring it forward. I was very lucky to meet my wife, Charlotte, in 1987. So we've been together like 34 years. But one of the big goals I set was to have some kids and also to clear my mortgage and have this sort of £1 million house and pay it off before I was 40. And it was more to prove, can you do that? Funny enough, I paid it off by the time I was 39 and a half. I set the goal. Actually, it's fully mortgaged up to the hilt because interest is cheap. So why not borrow and leverage to do more projects? And then when I can, if I can do trips, I did a great trip in Vietnam in 2018, but ended up having 2 knee operations and an operation on my shoulder. And I'm still a big fan of, you have to push and push and push. And hopefully that has inspired you to think, what, actually, how could I push myself? For me, it's all about creating a legacy for my family. And what I did is, I remember hearing about a guy called Tony Robbins in 1991. I thought, what is this guy up to? Anyway, very long story short, his first ever event was at the NEC in Birmingham. And I remember being in a pinstripe suit, walking across these burning hot coals, thinking I must have joined some religious cult. The point being, in where we are today, folks, you have the ability to rewrite your story, rewrite your post-COVID story. We've all had to have to pivot and adapt and change, and those of us that do that will succeed. So Robbins, I know, is doing an event in the UK in June. It's virtual, but he did an event a few weeks back, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and it reignited my passion to go and do more. And you can search that out. I think it's upw360.com. That's just something if you've never looked at doing personal development, reading as many books, etc. Coming to the property bit, the money piece, look, it's not complicated. There's 100% joint venture funding, build to sell, 50-50 profit share. We went through how that works. Or there's the traditional funding where you're not sharing the profit with the lender, but you've got to put a little bit more in, but potentially you could JV with business partners that you have. Or we're looking at number 3, which could be just joint venture funding, maybe like the project I talked about that I'm doing with the developer, or actually you go buddy up with 2 or 3 other people, come to me and we get the senior debt. Or just good old fashioned traditional bridging finance, plus the normal buy to let, second charge and your resi mortgages. I've got a whole team that work with me that'll be able to help you. So I guess you've got a couple of options really. That is, crack on as normal, doing what you're doing. If you want to, arrange to have a chat with me where we can talk about the 100% product, the traditional funding, or or chat with you about your strategy. So you've got the opportunity to book a 15-20 minute call with me. I don't know if we've got the chat box because I can't see that on my screen, but if you want to get hold of me, it's really easy. You can go to tinyurl.com and then it's /Rory call, and you can grab a slot in my diary. And also you can email me at lnpg@closedbridgingfinance.com, and the tiny URL is there. So guys, that's me. I've pretty much covered what I wanted to go through. Happy to take any questions.
I'm glad you said that, because there's a hell of a lot that have come in, and I'm not surprised with so much content in such a small space. You didn't stop for breath.
No, well, you gave me an hour, and I think I did an hour.
And Rory, hi everybody.
Hi, Nick.
I didn't do today. I let Paul run today because obviously mine's not 100% with it today.
Right.
But brilliant. I was listening in the background, and I just wanted to come on and just say thank you very much for coming on. There was
my pleasure.
There was huge content. So just thank you so much, and thank you for everybody listening. All right, I'm going to shoot off now. Yeah, I know Paul and Anthony are going to run tonight. So just like to say hi to everybody. I am alive. Yes, I will be back early part of next week, back to my normal yakety self, but just a couple of days on my own. All right, you'll be good.
Okay, Nick, thank you.
All right.
Cheers, Nick.
Cheers.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came in as you were talking there, Rory, was do you have mortgage companies that you can depend upon? My experience so far is when bridging the mortgage co and solicitors are so slow and incompetent that the bridge becomes very expensive due to the extra time it takes to set the mortgage after development or refurb.
Listen, the challenge you've got is, you've got many moving parts. If you've got, if you're acquiring, the bridger may have a solicitor, you've got a solicitor. That's a tricky one to handle because you can't control it. The lawyers call the shots, even on stuff that we do. Sometimes it can take a little longer than planned. That's the nature of the game. And the challenge is now, guys, I've got a flip that I've done in Blackpool. It's just taking forever, and I can't make it go any faster. It sort of is what it is. But yes, we look to move as quickly as we can, but let's not kid ourselves. We know who the main players are. There are a core number of lenders, and depending what you're trying to do, you can work with some lenders because you fit the criteria, and you've sort of got to go at that pace. sometimes you can't control the conveyancing element.
I'm going to go rogue here.
Yeah, dude, listen, far away.
Ask a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Because you were so exhaustive with your criteria for who you should do a joint venture with,
Yeah.
that, you've got to make sure that they've got this, that, the other, checking them for bankruptcy and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What sort of lists do you look for, criteria do you look for when you're looking for someone to partner with regards to solicitors, with regards to mortgages?
Right, solicitors, I'm going to be blunt, guys. I have a lawyer who acts for me. I don't even recommend my lawyer. So if there's any lawyers on tonight, I don't apologize. Because, and the same with accountants. People say, can you recommend? No, I just won't.
I can't believe you said that.
No,
I actually can't believe that.
People who know me know I tell it as it is. And you could have a good day or a bad day. Yeah, I think what we try and do if we're working, say, with solicitors, you try and build that long-term relationship. But sometimes there are things that are out of your control. And we've got one with this sale that's going through now. I cannot make it go any faster. And so I think you just have to suck it up. Yeah, because if it stresses you out, you're in the wrong game. It's don't get me wrong, because I have very high standards for how I work, but sometimes you just have to roll with the punches and go, right, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. It's a shame that there's no secret magic trick that we were going to get revealed tonight.
No, sorry. If you're looking for that silver bullet, folks, it doesn't exist. I think you got to just do it's hard work. You go with it. You try and build rapport with people as best you can, and then sometimes you just have to go with it. Yeah. So with
regards to some of the case studies you had up now, I mean, this came through during your first few, so you did show a couple of smaller ones afterwards.
Yeah.
But the question was, they seem like a lot of big projects. What are the sort of smaller projects that you work on as well?
Yeah, so I've done loads. These are ones that spring to mind that are quite good to get you thinking differently. But so let's see, if you remember, one of the projects was the house that was converted into two with an extension on the back. That's not that complicated. That particular investor, from memory, actually, we just done a 3-bed house in Sheffield. And it literally was like what they say, a tart and turn. They just, bought it, lick of paint, carpets, out the door. I've got one in the north, get my bearings right. I've got one in the northwest that I'm doing. So I had an investor approach me. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy it. You do all of the work. We'll split the profit 50-50. And that was a refurb of around 25,000. I went up once to look at it. There's many different ways you can do it. So you could start with simple 3-beds, but you've got to make sure the numbers stack. Or what I prefer to do you remember right at the start, we talked about leverage. So who can you leverage who's got the skills so that actually you can do more? Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So sort of standard question for us here, how can we obtain a recording of this session? And probably the most pertinent one for this session in particular, because I'm going to have to watch this 3 or 4 times back as well to just figure out how Rory did that maths in his head so quick. So this is being streamed right now on the LNPG private Facebook group, where you can go over to that immediately and rewatch it to your heart's content. But we're also be putting this on LNPG's own webinar library on lnpg.co.uk/webinar-library. And that'll be up in the next couple of days or so, because we like to write a short little blog to go with it as well. So not too long now.
Sorry, I see Sarah said that went way too fast. Sorry, Sarah. I have got so much content I want to share, because if I went slower, you'd get less. And you can replay this anyway. But yeah, I'm trying to inspire you. Yeah, it is quick. I apologize, but I just want you to get your thinking, really.
Replay it at half speed is my advice.
Yeah. I listened to Audible on 1.5 times. Maybe you could slow this down. Yeah. Any other questions? I've just gone through. I can see the chat now, guys.
Okay. So what about permitted development of unused farm buildings?
Yeah. Again, I need to look at the project. Pitch me the deal. Let's understand it. Yeah, everything. I just start everything with a blank sheet and go, let's understand it. You know, one of the key people, if you're doing work like this, my expertise is not permitted development on unused farm buildings. So who's your go-to person, as in your planner? I think that's probably one of the most important people in your power team. Who's your planning consultant? Who's a qualified town planner, who can give you some advice, tell you what you can and can't do. I've got a friend of mine, I live in Winchester, in Hampshire. I've got a friend who's got a lot of property in and around Southampton. Go-to person will be the planning consultant. I went to look at a site the other day. Someone contacted me. It's nearly an acre. He either wants to offload it. Am I interested? Who do I know? First thing I'll do, took some photos, went to see him, straight back to the planning consultant. What do you think you could do here? And then take their advice, because they should understand the local development plan and local planning law, and then give you some really good pointers. Yeah.
I've got one question that's come into me about 3 or 4 times now, so I've not forgotten about it, but it's APRs for buy to let. What's your sort of typical APRs that you'd be looking at there?
Well, interest rates on buy to let. I think if you're looking, the rates that sort of change all the time. You'd probably have to, probably 2.x%, 3% or thereabouts, roughly.
Okay, brilliant. Well,
yeah.
I think the person that asked me that will be in touch with you very soon, because they asked me for your phone number about halfway through as well.
Okay. Just trying to look. Yeah, I'm scooting through now. I can see some of the questions. Someone said, hold on. Oh yeah, does that mean bridging works well? Oh, Sarah, for projects that are to turn around quickly, and not tied to mortgage terms. Yeah, but I work on, actually, I didn't talk about this, so let me cover this really quickly. I always focus on what I call ROI, or return on capital employed. And that's the key thing I focus on. So when I had some HMOs which we sold, how much money did we leave in after the refurb? So let's say we left 50,000 in. Well, my target was to try and get at least a 15 to 20% return on my cash or tax. So as long as I was getting a 15 to 20% return on my capital, actually I was quite happy. And that wouldn't factor in any potential capital growth. So bridging works well. I look at it when it's basically, what's my return on cash? If I can get it out quickly, then, and it meets my objectives, then a bridge would be appropriate. You wouldn't normally use a mortgage to go and buy a property, refurb it and sell it. That's not really what the lenders would want you to do. And yes, you could probably do it, but you wouldn't want to be a repeat offender.
Very true.
Yeah. Do you have, from Jason, do you have to bridge to HMO? Oh, sorry. Do you have a bridge to HMO to a mortgage within 6 months? That will depend. There are some lenders, generally there can be the 6-month rule, as they say. I've got a project, actually I'm working on with someone now, they've done a conversion. The value after conversion is created a couple of flats, way exceeds the price he's bought. That will go on a bridge for 6 months. And then after that 6-month period, he'll probably split the title and we'll go to 2 separate mortgage lenders to extract value from both flats. With the HMO, sometimes you can do it within 6 months. It will depend. Like most things, I think it depends, guys.
Just a final question then.
Yeah, sure.
How do you arrive at a reliable GDV figure whilst you're doing your due diligence at the planning stage?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but what would I do? This project I went to see the other day, first thing I do is I go to good old Rightmove, and I'd want to see what's for sale today. I'm interested in what people are asking. So let's say you found a strip of land, maybe it's an acre. I only learned this the other day. So a hectare is 2.47 acres, and a hectare will take 30 houses, and an acre probably about 9 approximately. And this particular site, funny enough, next to it, they had 9 houses. So I went, right, let's go up and down that road. Let's go to Rightmove and get a feeling for what 3 beds sell for, what 4 beds sell for. And that's how I try and derive the GDV. I'm mindful in the current climate, valuers are chipping valuations maybe by 10% in some areas. I'd factor that in. And the old-fashioned value of a piece of land with planning is probably worth a third of the GDV, approximately. And that's a rough guide, a very rough guide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Go
on, Paul.
Yes,
Yeah,
Paul, you look like you had
say-
something you wanted to chip in there. Please do.
Yeah. What I was going to say was that I've made some notes tonight, which hopefully everyone else has done. But there were 4 key issues that I thought were important. One was the power team you mentioned. And although you said you were reluctant to recommend a good lawyer, tax accountant, or financial advisor, as everyone says, always do your due diligence on that. And one firm I'm happy to recommend is the one on the LNPG, as regards solicitors, is the one on the LNPG Facebook group.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is Tim Bishop at Bonlock and Bishop. Tim, I would emphasise, is a property investor and landlord, but he's not a conveyancing lawyer. So, but what his team, he's got people in his team who do that, and he's very, he's on the ball. So that's one recommendation. Second point is, if you haven't got a track record, as Rory said, make sure you JV with someone who has done it before and do your due diligence on them. Make sure you understand who they are. As Rory said, if you want to invite them to tea or dinner, then yeah, look elsewhere. Third one I picked up, which is always a good one, which I've known about for ages, is that if you want something for nothing at the end of the day, make sure your margin is at least 27%, because that way you can then do a buy and hold. So once you developed and refurbished, you can hold that and remortgage normally, as long as you got that margin. So minimum 27%. So you got your 25% deposit in inverted commas already funded. And then lastly, one thing you said, can they develop? Can they develop? So Rory, from your experience, who would you go with? Is it DPD, UPS, or your postman? I'm only joking.
That depends. Actually, our postie's pretty good, to be fair. He's never let me down. But the dogs bark at all of them. Here's an interesting one. Someone said to me, it was a direct message, so I won't read their name out. In 3 words, why would I invest with you, Rory? I'm not looking for investment, guys. I do borrow from investors, but I don't actively go out to seek investment. What I'm looking to do is to arrange the funding for you. And then if I JV, which I don't do that often, if I'm brutally honest, I look to try and arrange it, or I end up just being the lender. Yeah, but I am open to, if a project makes sense, then I'll again take it on a case-by-case basis. But what I wanted to try and do tonight is to get just you to open your mind to think, actually, I could buddy up with someone. There is potential, maybe I could look at the 100% joint venture funding, which is build to sell. I'll be really clear on that. But if we weren't doing that, if you wanted to build to hold or a mixture, who do you know in your network who you could leverage that would enable you to go, actually, that's a project this year, I'm going to go and do that. Where are we now? February. So actually, could you go and do one new project, something you've never thought of in 2021? If you can, then I've done my job tonight. I've inspired you to go and do something else. Unless there's any other questions, guys, I'm really conscious of your time because I don't want to take up any time, but hopefully that's been really
that's
really
been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, what I want to just emphasize is that we are looking at developing service providers for mortgage broking, and Rory is going to be one of the team that are going to be on the LNPG website. We've got another guy on, Cam Gumman. Are you able to put the one-click finance guy on, Anthony?
I shall give it a go. I think it's a case whether he's going to let me, to be honest.
Are you there, Cam?
I am. Good evening.
There we go.
Right. Just, yeah, I'm not expecting you to do a half-hour presentation. If you just say hi to everyone and give a introduction to yourself and what you can do for our members.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Apologies, I joined late. I was stuck in a very interesting meeting with a client and a bunch of lawyers for a very interesting and complex and sort of long-winded case. But anyway, I think I just joined when Rory was mentioning a couple of things, and I don't want this to turn into an anti-legal sort of solicitor bashing session, but I do have to agree that finding a great solicitor who can move very quickly and knows your client needs is very difficult to obtain. They are like gold dust, but it's that age-old saying, you pay for what you get for. So it is worthwhile spending the extra money if you do come across a credible solicitor. Usually by recommendation, I think is usually the best way for, especially if you're dealing with a local area. In terms of what we do, I heard a bit of the elements of what Rory went through. We don't sort of specialize in JV and lending our own funds or have a funding line. We are the traditional brokerage in terms of we face off between the client, i.e. your LNPG members, and a whole range of banks, building societies, private financiers up and down the country. So I'm sure Rory has spoken about a lot of this, so I don't want to duplicate what he said given the time, but that ranges from the short-term lending, from the bridging, HMO finance, auction finance, to other short-term measures like cash flow funding. And then on to the more traditional elements of long-term lending, which is your secured mortgages against buy-to-let or HMO. We also do the short and long-term sort of development finance as well, which can be the sort of back of the bridge. So if you buy an auction property and go straight into a very quick development, or the longer term 1, 2, 3 year projects where you're doing a ground up, buying a plot of land, etc. I don't want to dwell on too much because that's probably all, you guys are all familiar with this. You're all professional landlords and developers. Rory has probably gone a lot of it, but I'm happy to take any questions, or if there's anything, Paul, you think may be worthy, I'm happy to spend a minute or two.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything specific. It was just a quick intro. And at some stage, once we've got the web pages developed, we'll be bringing Cam on, Rory on, and perhaps 1 or 2 others to at least offer you guys a choice. So, look out for future developments. I think it just leaves me to say, unless Anthony's got any more questions, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you found it very useful. And don't forget to join us next week. Hopefully, Anthony will be able to share who the speaker or topic is next week. Are you around, Anthony?
You would think so, wouldn't you? Yeah, I am. So I'll be back here, back in my kitchen again next week. And we'll be talking about property staging. So we went over this a little bit last week, when we were talking about the psychology of color. This is how to make your properties look absolutely top notch in order to raise their valuation and, appeal to tenants, appeal to buyers, and sort of the science behind that. So we've got one of the top property staging experts, who I'm not going to reveal their name. I'm going to keep it as a bit of a surprise, but let's just say that they're absolutely all over Facebook, so you've probably heard of them already. And yeah, I look forward to hearing all about that this time next week.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Roger.
You're welcome, Roger. Thanks for joining us, and see you all next week at 6:45.
Thanks,
and
guys.
thanks, Rory.
Appreciate your time.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rory.
Thank you.